I want to do two things before we get started. First, I want to encourage you. It is going on 8 o'clock on a snowy Tuesday night, and we're going to talk a little bit about making the first move. And you all have already made that first move. You've had a long day. You've got families at home, kids, spouses, things to do list piling up, and you made the decision to come here. And that was not an easy decision. And you're still here, which is great. So I just want to encourage you and say thanks for coming. And hopefully you've heard some things tonight that will change your life and the way you see entrepreneur work. And second, I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray for you and I encourage you before we get started. So, God, we just ask that you would slow us down. And we have had crazy days. We've had a lot filling our plates, and we have a lot of dreams ahead of us. And we just ask that you would be present in our lives and know that you are working your will through us, and that we would rest in that. But that we would be excited and courageous about the future, and that you would provide words and wisdom tonight to build into us as business people, entrepreneurs, wantrepreneurs, corporate employees and employers. So thank you for what you have done through Unpolished and building into us. So in your name, amen. All right, I realize a couple of things. One, I am between you and some beer, which is even worse than being between you and lunch. So worst case to be, and so I'll try to make this quickly. Actually, I'm really excited to be here tonight, and that's not just a grand gesture. 1 year ago, my friend, Mike Hillenmeyer, invited me to Unpolished. And I was working at P&G and had expressed to him my desire to be an entrepreneur. And we'll talk a little bit about telling people your story here in a little bit. And Mike said, man, you got to come to this thing. Like, it's crazy. It's taken off. And for me, it was just a way to scratch the entrepreneurial itch. And that was literally 1 year ago this week. And I'll tell you a little bit about the things that have happened in my life and the lessons I've learned on getting unstuck. And hopefully my goal is to not tell you, give you a bunch of lessons, but tell you a couple stories, and hopefully those will ladder up to some lessons. So I'm going to, I want to caveat with a couple of things. One, this is going to be in PowerPoint. I feel like I've stepped into this entrepreneurial space, and you say to people like, hey, can you send me the PowerPoint? And they looked at you like you said, can you send me the 8-track? Like, is PowerPoint not a thing anymore? Like, I got to be in Keynote. It's just fair warning. This is going to be in PowerPoint, so prepare. That's what we're going to be doing tonight. Secondly, in case things got off, Brian spoke earlier. This is just a Kindle, but I was going to hold it just because I feel like there's always this like swiping, and it just works right away. And so I may swipe. I'm not swiping anything. It's just a Kindle. It's got books on it. But if I get uncomfortable, that's what I'm going to do. So I work for a company called the Harvest Group. It is not high tech, although we like to be that way. We provide retail services for small and medium-sized businesses that sell to Kroger. So as glamorous as that sounds, and when I jumped into this entrepreneurial space, I started to be surrounded by these high-tech companies who had awesome names like Circle and Listener and Tixers and Agar and Battery. And man, I was like, we need a better name. Like the Harvest Group, like I learned 3 things from this middle column. 1, like vowels don't matter. 2, if you're going to be a word, misspell it. And 3, try to pick a word that means everything and nothing at the same time. Like that. So I was like, great, well then I want to work for HRVST. That's who I work for. So we renamed the company and no, we didn't. I'm just kidding. I want to start with a quote when we talk about getting unstuck. This is a quote from Seth Godin's book, Tribes. I realize that Seth Godin is kind of Entrepreneur 101. That's where you start, and he is kind of at the forefront of encouraging people to step out in faith and take that first leap. And so I want to read this from this book. So here we are. We live in a world where we have the leverage to make things happen, the desire to do work we believe in, a marketplace that demands remarkable. And yet, in the middle of these changes, we manage to get stuck. And that's where I found myself. And I think those are poignant points. Never before in the history of the world have we been at a point where you can be in control of a product and you can deliver remarkable tomorrow. I mean, the 3 people who've been up, Mike talking about, we had a client meeting that day, and the stories you're hearing, That happens now unlike it's ever happened before. So the community and the resources are out there. So how do we get unstuck? Well, I wanted to do something. This looks ridiculous, but I realize as much as entrepreneurs, it's like, yeah, we are artsy, crafty, creative people. Listen, you're a lot of type A'ers in here. So I thought stories upon stories. I'm going to put a model up, just this overdeveloped model for type A'ers. I figured this way you can put this in your Evernote, your OneNote, your Simple Note, your Box Note, whatever they are that you're taking notes in. And then you're going to be like, yes, that guy nailed it. And then 1 year later, you'll find that note. That's usually how it works for me. It's like, yes, I'm going to act on these things tomorrow. I'm changing my life tomorrow. And then about a year later, I'm like, oh, I totally forgot how I took those notes. It's a great part of Evernote. So we're going to unpack these a little bit. This is just more what I've learned, kind of my 4 key points of over the last year of how to get unstuck. It's listen, discern, tell, and move. And as we work around that wheel, we're going to unpack a little bit about that, about how do we get from this idea of what is God putting on your heart? We've talked a lot about tonight about listening to what God is telling you and what he's calling you, discerning that and understanding what's good and what's bad and what's right and where do I move next, then telling somebody about that. We are meant to be in relationship. We are meant to be in community. That's what Unpolished is. If there's ever been a safe place to tell somebody a bad idea, this is it. You've got beer, have 2 or 3 beers and be like, I got this thing, and somebody will tell you it's a good idea, for sure. It may not be, but somebody will tell you it's a good idea. And then last and not least, move and figure out what that first thing that you have to do to follow the thing that's on your heart. So let's talk a little bit about that. First is listen. Man, that's really hard. Creating time and space for listening. I wanted to read this from Psalm 5:3. In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice. In the morning, I lay my requests before you, and wow, I can't read that anymore. And you wait expectantly. Sorry. That's something I struggle with. And I don't know about you. We talked about the busy days. Time gets away from you. Listening prayer, or just taking time to take a deep breath and listen to what God has put on your heart, that is something that never makes the to-do list. It's way too full of things that you have to do. And so I've tried to create time and space in my life. I run. I'm not a runner, but I run. And that has become my place where I listen to what God's trying to tell me. And I when I first heard about the call of the Harvest Group, I was going on a run. I lived in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I worked at P&G on selling to Walmart, and I was on a run. And I'd met the 2 guys who started the Harvest Group, and the company started in Northwest Arkansas. And I can tell you exactly where I was at this moment. I was running down the street in our little neighborhood. We had been there for 6 months. I knew the company for 6 months, knew the friends who started it, and I felt this like jolt. And I'm not saying this doesn't happen to everybody. It's my experience. And it was like, you are going to move to Cincinnati and start the Harvest Group. And I came home and told my wife. If my wife were here, she would say, yeah, I remember that. And I told you you're crazy. Like, that's a bad idea. And I said, that was weird. That was different than what I've heard previously. And so just kind of put it in the back of my mind and went on. We were in Fayetteville for 4 years. So what I would say is if you can build a habit of listening, creating listening prayer, and Brian has talked previously and Chuck about we talk to God. We do a great job when we pray. It's like, man, I got to talk to God. I got to tell him this. I got to tell him this. What if we just rested and took a deep breath and said, God, I am asking you to put on my heart what you want me to do. I believe, and you've heard the speaker say tonight, that he will do that. And he's faithful to do that. So we start with listening. Next is to discern. I am in a room full of passionate entrepreneurs. You have ideas every day. You got 100 ideas every day. I promise you, not every one of them is good. So we have to discern. There are great people, and we'll talk about telling. There are great people to use as that discerning voice. I generally tell my wife the first time I have an idea, and usually it's like, hey, you are crazy. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's a good one. Don't do that. Do 4 out of 5. These are not good ideas. But God is the great, and he promises discernment. And so what I would say is as we go through this process of listening, there's a second step of discerning. And I think about discerning in a different way. Listening is the what. Like, what is God putting on your heart? That's that part of the process. Discerning is the why and the how. I want to touch on this for a minute. I think a lot of times people who are in corporate jobs, desiring to be entrepreneurs, some of you are in this space, you got to determine why. Mike talked about why the why, what's the real why. If your desire to be an entrepreneur is because you hate your job or because you want to make a lot of money, I would encourage you that maybe that's not the right why. I would tell you to keep listening to what God is calling you to a greater purpose and a greater passion. And I know because I've been there. I spent 10 years, 5 years as a public accountant, and then 5 years at P&G, which I have loved every part that has taken to my story. But once I realized that I didn't want to run from something, I wanted to run to something. So I found myself looking for this, like, I got to run away from here, I got to run away from here. When I felt that call to say, no, I want to run to that. I'm not running away from this. That was the change for me. So that is the why. And then a little bit more tactical, the how. These are just a couple things. As I made my decision to leave P&G and join the Harvest Group 6 months ago, I kind of looked at, we're all in the world of trying to add a little bit of logical thinking. So a couple things to analyze as you make that decision. One, is it personally compelling? And I use that word because it doesn't have to be something, like, we can get caught up in this idea of, like, it's got to be something you love, got to be something you love. If you don't love it, don't do it. Man, that's a high bar and a high standard to set. I would say it's got to be something you want to do. Is it something you can wake up in the morning and say, I want to go do that? And yes, you might love it, and I hope for you, my prayer is that you do find something that you love, and you're the person walking around like, hey, it's not work if you love it. Like, great, that's good for you. But if you want to do it, and you wake up wanting to do that, I think that's good enough. Secondly, are you going to be working with people you love and trust? I know as I analyzed making the move that I made in my life, one of the things that gave my family, and that's why I love Mike's story, gave my family rest, was the people I was going to join in business were people that I loved and that she loved and that she trusted. And so that above all of these vectors, she said, hey, I know these people, and I know they have the right thing for you in place, and they have the vision for the company. So I would just ask that maybe you look through that lens. Third, is there a pathway to financial stability? So I'm not saying you can't take that leap and say, we're going to lose money for 5 years, and that's awesome. That's great. But can you put a model together that looks like financial stability at some point? And that may not come to fruition, but at least on paper, do the numbers work out that at some point in time, it'll work? And I put this last. I'll get in trouble. I should have put this first. Family alignment. If you are making this leap and your family isn't all in, you might be doomed from the beginning. I think it's important to sit down with your extended family, the people who are going to be your support network, and say, here's the leap I'm getting ready to make, and I need your support, and I'm going to need your love and your grace as I go through this process, because it might not be pretty, and it might be grimy, but on the other side, I know that I'm following God's calling for me. So those 4 things, I think, is I just try to think through those lenses as I make a decision in discernment. Next is tell. This is pretty simple, but for some reason, this is where we get really caught up, not we. I don't want to accuse you of that. This is where I get really caught up, because you have an idea, and man, that keeps you up at night. You can't go to sleep without thinking about this. And yet, you are surrounded by people who want to hear those ideas, and you're like, I don't want to tell you that idea. Either you might not like it, I might be embarrassed, you might question my sanity, you might take it, you might try to alter it, and I don't want you to alter my idea, it's my idea. But I would encourage you, if you tell people, not just your idea, but start telling people you want to be an entrepreneur. You want to be involved in things like this. If I didn't tell Mike Hillenmeyer a year ago, we moved here a year and a half ago, and when I first met Mike, we started talking about, man, I'm feeling this calling, this burn, this passion to be an entrepreneur. If I didn't tell him that, then he would never have invited me to Unpolished. And if I didn't tell the guys who started the Harvest Group that I had that vision of us starting Harvest Kroger 3 years ago, they would never have come and said, hey, it's time to do that. And so I would just encourage you that you don't have to go out and say, I've got the idea, let me tell. Just start telling people in your network, in your family and your friends, that this is what the vision I have for my life. And this is what I think God's calling me to. And over time, I believe God works through conversation and relationships. And it might not be immediate. It most likely won't be immediate. But we are designed to be in community. We're designed to be in relationships. So I would just say take that leap, as embarrassing as it might be, and tell somebody. And the last one is move. And making moves makes momentum. This is the hardest part. You've gotten over telling somebody, now do something. And I would tell you at some point you will have to cross the Rubicon. You will have to, and the moment in my life is sitting across from my boss who I loved at P&G and saying, hey, I'm making the leap, I'm leaving. That was crossing the Rubicon, but way before that, there was little tiny steps that had to happen. And what I try to do is just write down and say, what's the next thing? Just the next thing. The next thing could be tell someone. The next thing could be, I don't know, I have a brand idea. I need somebody to, I'm not artistic. I need a brand logo. That could be the next thing. What is that very, very immediate next step that has to happen for the thing that God has put on your heart? And then what's the next one? And what's the next one? And over time, you'll start to see the momentum. Making moves makes momentum. So as I round out, I was in a Brave group. Anybody in a Brave group this past year? That changed my life. And during that, they asked you to take one of the scripture references and put it as your screensaver on your phone. If I got my phone out, that is a picture of my phone as it stands today. And I haven't changed that because at that point in time, as Brave came along, I was at P&G and I was getting ready to cross the Rubicon and I was getting ready to leave. And I had phenomenal support from friends in that group who said, you have to go. You have to make the next move. You have to tell someone, discern, and follow all of the things that we've talked about tonight. And so I just want to encourage you that what Philippians 2:13 says is, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in accordance to fulfill his good purpose. And why that's important is this is not our good purpose, not my good purpose. We're fulfilling his good purpose. So as you hear what you heard tonight, I love the visual of being flicked off the ledge. That is not your purpose you're fulfilling. It's God's purpose that he's working through you. And that should make you excited. And that should make you wake up and say, all right, God, I don't know what you're doing, but man, I'm excited for the story that you're going to tell through me over time. And I'll be patient, as hard as patience is. I'll be patient to listen and discern, tell somebody, and make that first move. Thank you. So you can't get out of this without doing an exercise. And I promise it'll be easy. But what we're going to do next is you're going to start seeing folks come down the aisle, and they're going to be handing you a card, and they'll hand you a pen. And the goal is to follow this model. And you'll see on the back there's 3 lines. And we're going to, I'm going to get off stage, and we're going to put some music on. And we just ask you to have 2-3 minutes of quiet time. And we're going to create that space that we talked about. What we'd like to just ask of you is to just listen to what God might be putting on your heart, discern what that thing might be. And then on the second line, write, who do you need to tell? Like, who's the person you need to go to tomorrow and say, man, I have got this thing I have to tell you about. And then on the third line, I want you to put, what's the very next move? Not the big thing, not secure a small business loan, not get venture capital funded, not get customers. What is the very, very next task that has to happen? What we'd like, and after we get done doing this, you keep that card. And the idea of Unpolished, we have 6 events this year and a conference. We want to walk with you along that journey. And the theme, as you'll see as we go throughout this year, is this idea of moving you along that path and moving us all along that path of entrepreneurship, and kicking off tonight with what's on your heart, what is that discernment, who do you need to tell, and what is the very next move. So we will continue to hand pens out, and then we'll just take maybe 3-4 minutes to have some time to ourselves. Thank you.